In today's video, we're going to be checking out what we learnt from Chelsea 1, Crystal Palace 1, a game where I actually think Chelsea played really well, but didn't come away with the 3 points, lost 2 points, and I'm fine with everybody having a sour taste in the mouth of not getting all 3 points. However, I do think there are positives from the performance, and we're going to speak about them today. Here's the team that faced Crystal Palace. We had Sanchez between the sticks, Colwill and Fofana as that centre-back pairing. It's really starting to gain its legs now. Gusto at right back, inverting into that midfield role, but not in the same inverted role that he's been playing so far this season, with Kukurea at left back. Then you had Caicedo as the number 6, who was dropping in to the back 4, which we're going to speak about in a little bit. Enzo and Palmer as the number 8, who again had slightly different roles. Madueke and Neto as the high and wide wingers, with Jackson leading the line. As far as the metrics go, the numbers looked pretty good. Chelsea creating 2.27 XG compared to only conceding 0.54 XG, holding 63% of possession, creating 5 big chances with 13 total shots, and having a 53% duel success with a 67.5% field tilt. So, the build-up shape, as I said, it was slightly different from the normal 3-2-5 that Chelsea have been using mostly under Maresca so far this season, and we're going to have a little live analysis part to speak about that and how they were using Palmer, Enzo and Gusto as the 3 advanced midfielders, but having Caicedo drop into the back 4 to create numerical overloads all over the pitch. Okay, so let's get into the tactics section of this video. So, as you can see on screen here, we've sort of basically got the starting setup that we had, sort of that 4-3-3 or 4-1-4-1 that you can sort of see at times with the 8s and the wingers sort of out of possession. How this looked in possession, as we've sort of touched on slightly just before this live tactics section, was a few different rotations that we saw. So, of course, we saw Gusto moving forwards, Fofana moving over to right back, Caicedo dropping in here to create that back 4 that you see there. Then Enzo would sort of play as that left centre mid. Palmer was the more central of the 3, and Gusto, instead of inverting into this area between sort of this 5-man pressing set of Palace, he was inverting further ahead. So you sort of have this 3-man midfield here, right? So you sort of saw this setup. Almost a 4-3-3 again. The important thing to note here is that you have got the sort of 5-man pentagon shape of Palace with their pivot and the 3 forwards. And the idea here that I sort of mentioned again before is the fact that you've got, without Sanchez, even when that ball is forward, you have this 4 at the back now, with Caicedo dropping in rather than being in this slot. So if you split the sections here, you actually have a 4v3 in terms of the back 4 versus the front 3 for Palace. So you've gained an overload there. Then how can you gain the overload in the next section? Well, here you've already got that 3v2. And the idea is that if you're struggling to progress the ball past this pivot and the 3 as 2 separate lines of pressure, then what you saw often was Palmer dropping in, but arriving in here to create that extra link play and not to stay in that zone isolated for too long. It was more so to arrive in the zone, receive the ball, and sort of either spin out play into these areas. Something that, again, the reason he was the one dropping in is because he is excellent at doing that sort of action and that sort of bringing the ball out, whether it's via a carry, via a clever pass, or he can obviously recycle and you can go around that way, around the outside. The other benefits of this is that once Palmer has done that job, he would then obviously come back to this area. So you'd have, if you go more direct through the lines and the pivot haven't yet recovered into those areas, you can actually also find yourself here with a 6v5. So you've got these guys running forwards, and then obviously your front 3 versus the Palace back 5. That is very messy, but I hope you understand what I mean by that. Let's get rid of these as well, just because they're in the way. So by doing that, we're allowing Palmer to link and arrive so that he can offer overloads in both aspects of play. It wasn't just Palmer doing this. There was times where Enzo dropped into here and again linked and came out. Same with Gusto. And it was more so the idea of one of them arriving in this space to help link play forwards and then attack the back line and still provide that 6v5 on the Palace back line. So it was always about gaining the advantage against the front five and the advantage against the back five, and sort of separating those into two separate causes. So Casade obviously dropping in creates that overload at the back. The other reason I think that this was done was actually the asset gain that you get from each player in this certain position. So now that you look at it like this, as I said with Palmer, very good at doing this role. If he dropped into here, he was also dropping in unopposed because he was dropping in from this area where they can't attach to him. When he drops into this area, they can, but it's such a quick movement and it's quicker link play that he's dropping in for seconds at a time, and then he's spinning out, and then he's going to basically become the free man at all times, which is exactly what you want from your best player, to get those moments of freedom on the ball. So I think doing that with Palmer, many people were calling it, why is Palmer playing at the six? I think it was a lot more sort of intriguing than that, to just say he was playing as a six. I think that there was the idea of him to become that freed man, and it worked a lot of the time in the first half, where he'd drop in and then he'd actually become the free man in this area of the pitch. And the goal came from it, where he got the assist. He had probably the best chance of the half before we scored, put in a curled effort literally just around the post in that scenario from around here. So I think that that was a brilliant idea of how to use Palmer and how to make him become the spare man against this Palace team. I think as well, having Casado dropping into the back four, I think you gained with Colwell, who was brilliant at doing this as well, and he was brilliant against Palace for this, is those progressive passes into this space. Again, can they bypass the pivot completely and get into this front three, as I said, directly? Or can they sort of wait and the timing of their passes to recycle and help play around the outsides? But I think having those two as those two players to with the responsibility to do that made the most sense in terms of what they can offer you from behind the ball, but also what they can offer going forwards and defending forwards. So if the ball was turned over in the middle of the pitch, I actually think that having the likes of Colwell and especially Casado facing forwards to defend forwards when that ball is coming towards him, which I think he's better at, rather than recovering and defending backwards. Again, with Fafana, I think he's a very front-footed defender. So having, and same with Kukurea. So same with having these four to defend forwards. I think having somebody like Gusto, who's a very good recovery defender, Palmer and Enzo, who have their transitional deficiencies, you could say. But I think what you actually saw was with Casado setting the precedent of pushing outward. You actually saw Enzo and Palmer pressuring play backwards, and they're actually converging on the ball really nicely as pairs from that midfield. So I think having Casado, I think that was again part of the sort of the construction of Casado to defend forwards and these guys to help pressure play and create those 2v1s when to win the ball back against this front five of Palace. And again, they limited them to absolutely nothing. Realistically, first half they had very little. Second half, apart from the Eze chance, and then a few towards the end of the game when it became a little bit more transitional. Not during the end, but in the middle of the second half. And that was again down to tempo, which I'm going to speak about before the end of the video in a non-live set. Games that we got from this system was very well set up from Maresca, and I think the notion and the idea that Glasner actually outworked or outdid Maresca in this game, I don't agree with at all. I think Maresca actually totally tactically bossed the game. I think the ideas were brilliant to sort of, like I say, get the best out of each player and what you want from them on the ball. I think having Enzo as that sort of space receiver, he's very competent at receiving that ball and again playing forwards. It wasn't his best game, but it definitely wasn't a poor game from him. Like I say, with Palmer, I've already spoke about him. Casado facing forwards. I also think Fafana being able to get the ball on the outside of a block. So what I mean by the outside of a block is this narrow block here, this pentagon shape. Fafana often able to get the ball and carry on the outside here to start attacks. And because he's got that running power, it actually kickstarted quite a few attacks where you can then have these players pushed higher up. And again, maybe maybe one or maybe even two of the pivot players are retreating at this point, but you're creating an overload where you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Chelsea players in attack versus the 7 of Crystal Palace, sorry, in defence. So you're at least creating a numerical not overload, but you've got this the 7v7. And again, if one of the pivots struggling to keep up with Fafana or they're trying to come over and cover this run, which is likely in what they did, and Fafana beats them, then again, then you've got the overload of a 7v6. So it's all about positional overloads, finding where you can get the numerical superiority on the pitch. And like I said, I think Maresca did that really well. whether it was with shape, or even just with assets and what each player can offer you with their attributes. As I say, with Fofana, his carrying. With Casado and Colwill, they're passing between the lines. Enzo as a receiver. Palmer able to link and then become free. And then Jackson, who didn't actually have as many touches but scored his goal, he was able to occupy a lot of the time when those defenders were shuffling over. He was able to occupy two at once, which is something, especially in the first half, he did really well by sort of keeping them honest, making those little pocket runs and doing his job there. So that was good to see. The wingers working hard off the ball and being direct on the ball. So I think Chelsea were very unlucky not to win the game. I do think they tactically dominated, if that's the right way to put it. And I do think that there's a lot of sort of, don't know what the word would be, but there's a lot of negativity around the Chelsea performance. And whilst I understand that you can have negative notions of the game because we dropped 2 points and it wasn't we didn't come away with the 3 points which were deserved, so it's an undeserved 2 points dropped. I think that to be annoyed at that in isolation is fine, but I think to actually doubt the performance is something else, because I really don't think the performance is worth doubting. I think in every metric it was very strong, and I just believe that tactically it was brilliant. There was a few players that maybe weren't at their absolute best, but even then, the individual performances weren't poor. Really good from Colwill and Fofana. And yeah, let's get into what happened in the second half. We'll do that in a non-live section, and then we'll go into the outro from there. So what went wrong in the second half? And honestly, not an awful lot. The main second half differences was the tempo increase after the goal. Maresca even said that Chelsea lost their way after conceding the goal. And for me, it was a lot to do with the tempo increase and playing at a much faster pace, which would lead to these sort of scenarios, as you can see on screen, with these transitional attacks for Crystal Palace. The main issue was psychologically, it took too long after that goal to regain composure and to slow the pace back down to the Chelsea standard and to control the game the way they wanted to do so. To have composure on the ball between the lines. There was visible frustration, poor body language as touches were going astray as they tried to up the tempo. As I said, as the tempo began to come back down and Chelsea started to control the game again, they re-established the control, they slowed, they had patience. The chances then came, but it was too late. And they didn't take the chances. On another day, you take one of those big chances of the 5 created and you end up winning that game 2-1 and you gain all 3 points. Wanted to give a huge shout out to Wesley Fofana and Levi Colwill. That partnership is starting to mould beautifully. I think the aggression of Fofana, the poise of Levi Colwill on the ball and his passing ability to progress through the lines, I think that Colwill and Fofana are going to be a formidable partnership as they continue to play and if they continue to stay fit and learn each other as a pairing at the back. Very happy with them too. Here's their stats on screen, and I just think they were excellent, so I think they deserve a big, big praise and shout out for that performance. So what did you make of the performance from Chelsea? Let me know in the comment section down below. Any questions, I'll try and get round to them. I have got a thread out on Twitter going through a few of these things as well, so go over there to check that out. If there's anything that I haven't covered in the video, ask me in the comments, as I said. Please do leave a like, it really does help out. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll be back tomorrow with a stream for a Tactics Talk stream based around the Crystal Palace game.